It wasn't fought in the jungles of the Pacific or the ruined cities of Europe. It was fought in a place so empty, so vast, that it barely seemed possible for life to exist at all. Yet here, armies clashed in a struggle that shaped the war. In ways few remember today, the desert is a place that erases things. Footsteps, roads, even entire battles. Wind sweeps over the sand, filling craters, swallowing wreckage, and leaving behind nothing but an unbroken horizon. It's easy for history to forget a war that leaves no ruins, no scarred cities, no monuments. Yet from 1940 to 1943, in the blistering emptiness of North Africa, a campaign unfolded that tested the limits of endurance, cunning, and survival. It is remembered, if at all, by the names of a few famous battles, El Alamein, Tobruk, but most of it has faded from the world's memory. Soldiers called it the Long Sand War. Historians simply call it the Western Desert Campaign. When Italy entered the Second World War in June 1940, Mussolini envisioned an empire stretching across the Mediterranean. Libya was already under Italian control, and to the east lay Egypt, held by Britain and guarding the Suez Canal. To take it would be to sever Britain's route to India, Australia, and the oil of the Middle East. Marshal Rodolfo Graziani commanded the Italian 10th Army. Over 200,000 men, supported by tanks, artillery, and aircraft. On paper, it was an overwhelming force compared to the thin British garrison in Egypt. But the Italians faced an enemy far older and more dangerous than the British, the desert itself. Their tanks were underpowered and prone to overheating. Their supply trucks bogged down in sand. Many soldiers were conscripts from northern Italy, unused to heat so intense it could warp metal. In September 1940, they crossed the Libyan-Egyptian border. It was not the lightning advance Mussolini had hoped for, just 60 miles in 3 days. They stopped at Sidi Barrani, dug in, and waited for reinforcements. It was a pause that would prove disastrous. The British commander, General Richard O'Connor, had only 36,000 men, British, Australian, New Zealand, Indian, and Sudanese troops, against Graziani's 200,000. Yet O'Connor decided to strike first in December 1940. Operation Compass began. Under cover of darkness, British troops moved through the desert, bypassing Italian strongpoints, cutting supply lines, and attacking from unexpected directions. They struck like a knife through cloth. Camps were overrun in hours. Whole Italian divisions surrendered without firing a shot. In just 10 weeks, O'Connor's small force advanced 500 miles, capturing more than 130,000 prisoners, almost the entire 10th Army, at the cost of just 500 British and Commonwealth dead. It was one of the most lopsided victories in modern warfare, yet it barely made headlines in Europe, where attention was fixed on the Blitz and the Eastern Front. Victory in the desert was never permanent. The land erased your gains as easily as your tracks. The heat was unrelenting to 120 degrees by day, near freezing at night. Sandstorms could rise without warning, blinding men and jamming weapons. Soldiers navigated by stars, because compasses sometimes swung wildly in iron-rich terrain. Private Jack McLaren of the 213th Australian Infantry later wrote, "You could drive for hours and see nothing but sand and sky. Then you'd spot a burned-out truck and realize it had been sitting there since the last war. Water was life. Convoys carried as much of it as they did ammunition. In the worst stretches, rations were cut to a pint a day, enough to keep you alive, but never enough to quench the thirst." The Italian collapse brought a new player into the Desert War. In February 1941, Adolf Hitler sent the Afrika Korps under the command of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Rommel was unlike any general the British had faced in North Africa. He struck without warning, using speed and deception to outmaneuver larger forces. Within weeks, He had recaptured much of the ground lost by the Italians and pushed deep into Egypt. O'Connor himself was captured in a surprise night raid. From then on, the Desert War became a seesaw, the same towns and ridges changing, hands again and again. Each side would advance until its supply lines stretched too thin, then retreat. Not all fighting in the desert was done with tanks and artillery. The vast distances meant small, mobile units often played an outsized role. The long-range desert group, made up of New Zealanders and British troops, roamed hundreds of miles into enemy territory in unarmored trucks, striking supply depots, airfields, and fuel dumps. They relied on stealth, speed, and the desert itself for cover. The Special Air Service, the SAS, was born here, its first missions targeting enemy airfields under the cover of sandstorms. These units operated without direct support, living off what they carried or could capture. Their raids rarely made front-page news, but they drained Rommel's strength one cut at a time. Between the larger clashes, life in the desert was a strange limbo. Soldiers built makeshift shelters from truck tarps and fuel drums. Letters from home took months to arrive. There were no towns to rest in, only the occasional oasis, and those were often mined or guarded. Entertainment was improvised. Card games, sing-alongs, and swapping stories around small campfires. Friendships formed quickly. In such a hostile land, trust was not optional. The Desert War never had the dramatic liberation of Paris or the iconic moment of a flag being raised over a city. Its battles were often far from civilian eyes, fought in landscapes that looked the same in every direction. When the focus of the war shifted to Europe in 1944, North Africa became a footnote. Even the veterans found it hard to explain the campaign to those who had never seen the desert. Sergeant William Price recalled, "You can tell people about the heat, the thirst, the glare. But unless you've been there, you can't know how it feels to see the horizon for days and never reach it." By late 1942, the tide was turning. The Allies had learned how to match Rommel's speed with their own, and their supply lines grew stronger. The decisive Second Battle of El Alamein in October 1942, the Axis grip on Egypt. From there, the Allies advanced westward. In May 1943, Axis forces in North Africa surrendered, over 250,000 men taken prisoner. It was the first major theater of the war where Germany suffered total defeat. Today, much of the Desert War lies buried. The sand has covered the trenches, the minefields, and the wrecks. But here and there, the ghosts remain. A rusting tank half buried in a dune, a faded helmet, the faint outline of a long-forgotten airstrip. For those who fought, the desert was as much an enemy as the men they faced. And though history often overlooks their struggle, the lessons they learned about adaptation, resilience, and survival in the harshest of environments remain timeless. As Price put it years later, "We fought a war where the desert was as much our enemy as the men across the line. And in the end, it didn't matter if the world forgot us. We remembered each other." The desert may not hold monuments like Normandy or Iwo Jima, but it holds the silence, the heat, and the memory of a war almost no one talks about. A war that still lingers in the shifting sands. The Desert War left behind no grand monuments, no towering ruins for tourists to visit. Its victories were written in the sand, and the wind has long since carried them away. But for those who fought here, the memories never faded. The endless horizon, the taste of dust, the faces of friends now gone. History may not speak their names often, but every grain of sand still remembers them. And if we choose to listen, their voices still ride on the wind across the empty miles. If you want to hear more of these battles, history almost forgot, the ones fought far from the crowds, please subscribe. Because the past still has secrets, and the desert is not finished telling its stories.